Hello, and welcome to UC Berkeley's online community presentation about the Long Range Development Plan, also known by the acronym LRDP. My name is Kyle Gibson, and I am the Director of Communications for UC Berkeley Capital Strategies. Capital Strategies provides a full suite of planning, design, real estate, construction, and development services to UC Berkeley. Capital Strategies is a part of the administrative division, and our department includes real estate professionals, architects, planners, engineers, construction managers, and administrative specialists that work together to serve the campus community. Joining me for today's LRDP community presentation will be Wendy Hillis. Wendy is UC Berkeley's Assistant Vice Chancellor for Capital Strategies, and she is the campus architect. As campus architect, Wendy provides strategic and long-range planning for the programming, design, and development of campus properties, including buildings, infrastructures, and landscape projects. Wendy also leads the campus's architectural design review and works closely with external agencies on city and regional planning and on development issues and initiatives. Also joining me will be Marissa Chang. Marissa is a senior planner with Capital Strategies' physical and environmental planning team. She has 3 degrees from MIT in urban planning, city planning, and in architecture. And in her career, Marissa has managed projects ranging from space planning to comprehensive master plans. Marissa has been the lead UC Berkeley campus planner managing the multi-year LRDP update process. And before we begin the COVID-19 outbreak in collaboration with our public health partners, we are operating in accordance with all public health directives and relevant orders pertaining to the public health emergency. Accordingly, we are hosting today's LRDP community presentation online rather than an in-person event. So today we'll start with a presentation that provides an overview of the updated long-range development plan and the project schedule. And then I'll post some of the frequently asked questions that have been asked to us that we've received during our ongoing multi-year public engagement initiative around updating the LRDP. So now I'd like to introduce Wendy to give the overview presentation about the draft LRDP. Wendy?
Thank you, Kyle. Marissa is going to bring up our slides for our presentation. But today I'm going to give you an overview of the campus's 2021 draft long-range development plan, or LRDP. Every University of California campus is required to have an LRDP, which is used to entitle its space and infrastructure needs. I want to emphasize that an LRDP does not determine a campus's enrollment or overall population. An LRDP approximates a population solely for the purpose of evaluating what facilities a UC campus may need in the future. UC Berkeley's updated LRDP will outline the planning objectives and describe a development envelope needed to meet the university's facilities needs. The planning objectives in our updated LRDP will support the campus's recently updated strategic plan, as well as associated infrastructure needs, including seismic safety, transportation, and sustainability. After the updated LRDP is approved by the UC Regents in 2021, future projects consistent with the plan can undergo a streamlined review process, both in terms of environmental analysis and university approvals. UC Berkeley's updated LRDP will address university-owned properties within the city of Berkeley, as well as a portion of the Hill campus that is within the city of Oakland. UC Berkeley has been and will continue to be intentional in its land stewardship. The central campus, what we call the campus park, accommodates the most academic and research facilities. Campus properties outside of the campus park are mostly housing and administrative functions. The university also has some research and academic facilities located on Berkeley Way in downtown Berkeley, adjacent to the campus park. The Hill campus is largely planned to be managed as open space with a limited number of recreational, research, and infrastructure facilities. We are currently about 3/4 of the way through a 3-year process to update the LRDP. Throughout the process, There have been ongoing campus and community engagement opportunities, including quarterly community advisory group meetings, surveys, in-person and virtual open houses, workshops, and focus groups. We will release the LRDP's associated draft environmental impact report on March 8th and anticipate presenting the LRDP for UC Regent approval in July 2021. The environmental impact report for the updated LRDP will analyze environmental effects of the plan's potential development described in the LRDP. Chancellor Christ advocates for UC Berkeley to be a low population growth campus. The updated LRDP's planning objectives reflect that goal. However, because enrollment decisions are ultimately made at the state and legislative levels, our updated LRDP will plan for some campus population growth at about 1% per year through 2036 to 37. To plan for 1% growth per year, in UC Berkeley's environmental impact report for the updated LRDP, we will consider adding up to 11,070 new student housing beds, 550 new faculty housing units, and up to about 2.5 million square feet of academic and campus life space. The principles and goals describe the LRDP's core values for the physical campus. They are intentionally flexible to provide guidance as internal needs and external conditions change over the next 20 years. First, we want to foster a vibrant and inclusive campus experience for students, faculty, staff, and visitors. That speaks to goals about a welcoming physical environment, to the provision of housing, and enhanced connectivity between the campus and the city environment. Second, we want to support the strategic plan and its goals for discovery, innovation, and interdisciplinary connection. This principle focuses on academic and research facilities. Third, we want to improve campus wayfinding and connectivity, how people get to campus and how they get around campus. We want to make it easy for everyone to get to and around campus, from sustainable modes of transportation to better wayfinding and accessibility. Fourth, our campus can be even more sustainable and resilient. Climate change is one of the drivers of this plan, and the LRDP recognizes the need to further integrate sustainability and resilience into every campus system, whether it's landscape, buildings, or infrastructure. Lastly, we need to optimize our campus resources. These resources are constrained. For example, we have limited land on which to build, and so we need to ensure the highest and best use of them. We need to build new buildings, but also renovate existing buildings. We need to make the best use of the land we have and plan for our campus to support the Berkeley mission now and in the future. This slide shows the population projections table from the draft LRDP. As you can see from the table, the 2021 LRDP considers more growth than the previous LRDP in order to responsibly plan for growth that may be required by the state legislature over time. This table provides more detail about these population projections. The LRDP uses the 2018 to 19 campus population as the baseline year associated with the EIR. As you can see, by the 2018 to 19 academic year, UC Berkeley's enrollment exceeded our current LRDP's projections. In 2036 to 37, at approximately 1% growth per year, we anticipate 8,490 additional students and 3,580 additional faculty and staff, for a total of just over 12,000 additional people. Note that the LRDP population projections are not a mandate for growth. The UC Regents and the state legislature ultimately determine enrollment, and the campus has a responsibility to proactively plan for facilities in the long term to support our educational mission and campus population. The 2021 LRDP's development program is an estimate of the space needed to support the campus population. Under the current LRDP, the campus developed approximately 1,300, or half of the student housing beds, and about 1 million of the total 2.2 million square feet of space it projected it would need. The updated LRDP space assumption is a net new need of approximately 2.5 million square feet of campus space, which includes academic, research, campus life, and support uses. 1,730 student and faculty beds, and 1,240 parking spaces. The 2021 LRDP plans for land use in 5 primary zones: the campus park, shown in blue, the Kerr campus, shown in orange, the Hill campus west, shown in light blue, the Hill campus east in green, and properties in the city environs, shown in red or orange on my screen. Neither our current LRDP or our updated LRDP include properties in Richmond or Albany. These sites have their own planning documents. This table from the LRDP shows how the development program could be distributed by campus land use zone. As you can see, the majority of academic, research, and campus life development would occur on the campus park, with housing development occurring in the city environs and on Kerr campus. Note that the maximum campus space numbers add up to a larger total than the development program. This is because our needs can and will change over time. And where we accommodate our needs over the next 15 to 20-year period may shift as a result. However, overall campus development would not exceed the envelope established by the development program without an amendment to the LRDP. At its core, the LRDP is a land use plan, and the 2021 LRDP uses 3 elements to guide land use: the potential future building areas map, shown here on the screen, land use guidelines, and land use objectives. The potential future building areas map is part of the LRDP land use section. It identifies potential areas where projects might occur in the future. As you can see, this map includes sites with existing buildings that could be redeveloped, as well as surface parking lots and other infill sites. Consistent with the table on the previous slide, most sites are located in the campus park, with additional sites primarily in the city environs and Kerr campus. The potential future building areas map is complemented by the land use guidelines table that you see on this slide. The Berkeley campus is characterized by mixed use development, and the land use guidelines identify which uses are intended for each campus land use zone. This table is an adaptation of the location guidelines table in the current LRDP and provides more detail on potential uses in each zone. We have identified priority and secondary uses in the table. Priority uses are uses that are preferred for a given land use zone, while secondary uses are allowable uses that could also be considered within a specific zone. The land use guidelines are then complemented by additional detail in the land use objectives, which include campus-wide objectives, as well as objectives for each land use zone, for historic resources, and for potential land acquisition. The Berkeley campus is the UC system's oldest campus, and the campus park is distinguished by many cultural and heritage landscapes and sites that contribute to its unique character. The campus reflects multiple architectural eras, from the classical core's expression of the picturesque and Beaux-Arts eras, to 19th century picturesque buildings along Strawberry Creek, to mid-century modern buildings located throughout the campus park. On this map, university properties listed on the National Register of Historic Places are shown in dark blue. University properties that are eligible to be listed on the National Register are shown in the lighter blue. University properties that are on the National Register of Historic Places or eligible to be listed in the register are generally also City of Berkeley and state landmarks and historic resources. The university is committed to stewardship of its historic resources. The 2021 LRDP includes specific objectives that apply to historic resources, including balancing preservation of historic resources with program needs, reinforcing the historic physical structure of campus, and using the Secretary of the Interior standards for the rehabilitation of historic structures to guide projects involving historic resources. The campus-wide land use objectives also discuss how the campus will consider and evaluate options when contemplating demolition of existing buildings. The draft EIR will provide additional information about historic resources, including buildings that will become age eligible for National Register listing within the LRDP EIR timeframe. This map highlights existing and potential sites for new student and faculty housing. The campus has identified 12 university-owned sites for new housing. To achieve the number of beds proposed in the 2021 LRDP, we anticipate that we will need to develop housing on every site identified. 2 of these sites are currently in development, Anchor House and People's Park. The remaining sites represent potential future opportunities, and the university will share additional information as projects are identified. CEQA, the California Environmental Quality Act, is an important aspect of the LRDP, and the university has been working to comprehensively analyze the LRDP in compliance with CEQA. This table shows our timeline for the EIR process. The notice of preparation notifying the public that we are preparing the EIR was posted on April 7th, 2020, with scoping comments accepted through May 15th, 2020. We will release the draft EIR on March 8th, 2021, with the public comment period running through April 21st, 2021. We will hold an online public hearing on March 29th, 2021. Additional details about the public hearing and how to submit public comments will be included in the notice of availability published with the draft EIR on March 8th, and will also be available on our LRDP website, lrdp.berkeley.edu. We anticipate approval of the LRDP by the UC Regents in July 2021, with the final EIR released in June or July. And with that, I'll open it up for questions.
Thank you, Wendy. Appreciate that very much. So the questions that I'm going to pose to you and Marissa are a compilation of questions that we have received frequently as we've been talking with different individuals and groups, both from the campus and the community, since we started the LRDP update process in 2019. And even some of these are as recent as a few days ago, since we've released the draft plan. So I'll just kind of kick this off a little bit and ask a question I've been asked a couple times just this week, which is when we did the online scoping session for the LRDP EIR, we also talked about 2 housing projects, the ones that you mentioned about People's Park and Anchor House. And they're not in the draft LRDP specifically. Could you touch on why they're not in the document, and will they be in the EIR that's coming out in, what is that, about a week from now on March 8th?
So this highlights the difference between the LRDP document and the LRDP Environmental Impact Report. The LRDP document applies to development across the whole campus. The People's Park and Anchor House projects are specific projects that usually would just fall under the LRDP if they were to happen later in the future. In this case, they're happening right now. So we are including them specifically in the Environmental Impact Report. And so you will see the documentation on those in the EIR document that will be released on the 8th.
And I would just add that there will be separate project approvals for the LRDP as compared to the People's Park and the Anchor House projects. And that is due to the difference between, their separate projects, and the LRDP is a program level document.
Perfect segue, Marissa. I actually would love to have you and Wendy follow up on, if the LRDP does not approve our projects, what does, and what is the university's project approval process for specific projects, and how does the LRDP relate to that?
I'll have Marissa take that one.
Sure. So as I had mentioned, the LRDP is a program level document, so it doesn't identify specific projects. But the campus does have a review and approval process for individual projects, and that's actually outlined in the LRDP in Chapter 5 implementation. And so as projects are conceived of and identified, they'll go through a planning review process on campus. And that essentially involves review by different committees and groups on campus in each phase of the project. So concept and feasibility, design, and construction. And so projects will go through that process. And then there is also another approval process that occurs through the regents or as delegated through the regents policy. And that depends on the size of the project. Individual projects will also go through the CEQA process. So that would include public notices, public meetings, any additional analysis that is needed beyond what is in the LRDP EIR. And projects that are consistent with the LRDP can typically undergo less analysis through CEQA just because they have been already analyzed in the LRDP EIR. But that is really a decision on a project basis.
I think the most important thing to note is that as projects become reality, there is a process by which we notify the community and the campus about the project and the process that it's going through.
Great. Another topic that has come up a lot as we have been discussing the LRDP update is about our campus enrollment. And the draft LRDP has projected enrollment numbers that take us through the 2036-37 academic year. And I know you touched on this a little bit, Wendy, when you were talking, but I think it's worth kind of revisiting a little bit. Are those our actual enrollment projections for what the campus is going to be seeing by that year? Where did these numbers come from? And what sets our enrollment? Is this document setting our enrollment, or is the Board of Regents, the campus? How does that happen?
This document does not set our enrollment. It just gives us an envelope within which we could plan for physical growth of the campus in the future. And, you know, unfortunately, that requires us to have a little bit of a crystal ball about where the legislature and the regents might take enrollment in the future. Campus, Chancellor Christ has been very clear that we are a low to no growth campus. That said, we can't be caught flat-footed with our development envelope in the future, which is why we've anticipated a very low growth of 1% of compounded growth per year. And I will add that that is less than any of the other UC campuses are projecting by far. We simply need to give ourselves enough room within a development envelope to be able to respond to whatever the legislature and regents give us in the future.
Okay, and that kind of also segues to a question about our facilities within the plan. Obviously, we're looking at a lot of potential development, and it sounds kind of like enrollment that this is something that we're planning a lot of, but may not actually do all of, but it's there if we need it. But is there a strategy between, are we going to be renovating existing buildings, or are we trying to build new buildings? Is there a balance between those? What is the plan advocating for in terms of our existing facilities?
The plan advocates for both. And we need to have both strategies in order to be able to adapt to what we have in the future. Just like none of us knew that COVID was coming and how this would affect our use of the campus on a day-to-day basis in the last year, we don't know what will arrive in the next 20 years. We're trying to do our best to set policies and a development envelope that will let us respond to that. We know that we have lots of important buildings on campus, architecturally important, historically important, that we'd love to renovate. We also know that there are some sites and buildings that don't represent the best capacity in terms of land use. The highest and best use is the term used by developers, where we may want to have additional capacity in the future. And this will, again, decisions will be made on a project by project basis, depending on funding and depending on the varying priorities that evolve over the next 20 years.
So I'm going to drill in a little bit on one specific area of the document, the Kerr campus, because this is definitely an area that we get questions on two very different spectrums when we've been presenting to the campus and the community. We have one group of our neighbors who are very concerned about development on Kerr campus, and there are covenants that we're currently under. And I was hoping you might be able to talk a little bit about what those covenants are, because we are talking about potentially some development at the Kerr campus, especially for housing. And we also have a lot of people in the community that are very encouraging of us wanting to build housing there, but those covenants will govern how that happens. Could you talk a little bit more about that?
So when we acquired the Kerr campus, which was historically the campus of the blind and deaf for the state of California, when we acquired that in 1982, we agreed to a set of legal covenants for the site for a 50-year period. So these covenants will expire in 2032. And the covenants limit the number of student beds and uses that we can currently have on that site, and limits any development on that site. The expiration of those covenants, 2032, occurs within this envelope of the EIR. We're looking out to 2036 to 37. So the last 5 years of this LRDP are really when we could begin developing and densifying the Kerr campus with additional housing and student uses. And that's what's reflected in this current document. I will say that the Kerr campus is listed on the National Register of Historic Places, and it's just a lovely architectural ensemble of these kind of mission style buildings. And definitely as we get closer to that 2032 date where we could develop out there, we're going to want to take a look at design guidelines and other stylistic decisions that ensure that anything we build out there in the future really is compatible with the historic character of the place, and that we develop it in a responsible way that enhances its beauty, but as well as its capacity to address our housing needs.
So another question that we've been getting about future development is, if we're going to keep getting greener as a campus, doesn't that mean that we're going to need to protect and not get rid of our green open space? How is the plan looking at maintaining our green space and open spaces on the campus, in spite of that we might need more development?
Mm-hmm. I would say, this is something that we really committed to, the commitment to maintaining the open space on campus. As part of this process, we surveyed faculty, staff, and students, as well as the public early on in this process at the beginning. And open space was one of the things that people value the most about the campus. People use it for relaxation, for contemplation, and it's very important to the community. So it was important to us then in this process that the LRDP maintain the current proportion of open space. And that is what we have done in the LRDP. So it is, one of the things that we were really looking at is it possible to build additional square footage, additional buildings on the campus while still maintaining the open space? And the answer is yes, and that is reflected in the LRDP. And I would just add, the LRDP is really committed to our campus sustainability and resilience goals and plans. So things like the University of California Sustainable Practices Policy for buildings, has stringent requirements for new buildings and for major renovations, as well as the UC Carbon Neutrality Initiative. These are some of the really important goals and policies and plans that guide us. And so, sustainability and resilience, is reflected in buildings, it's reflected in infrastructure, but also in transportation and landscape. So it's really kind of an all-encompassing value of this plan.
Okay, Marissa, I'm going to flip this around on you 180 degrees and say, what about our parking lots? A very different kind of open space. The plan is also talking about potentially those being good sites for infill projects and new buildings, but ultimately that means losing parking. Could you touch on that a little bit about how is the plan addressing parking?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so, open space is really important to the community, and I would say parking is also a key need. Many
Well, it seems like Marissa is frozen.
right now, and that really
Oh, there we go.
increases the potential.
Marissa, we lost
Oh,
you for a second. Would you mind starting over on that answer?
sure.
Thanks.
Yes, apologies. So parking is a key need for the campus. Many faculty
Zoom just doesn't want us to talk about parking, Kyle.
Oh,
I'm happy to take
a lot
that.
of pedestrians. And
Oh,
sorry, did you lose me again?
we
we
lost you
lost
again,
you.
Marissa. Let's do a
Okay.
third time to see if Zoom's
Okay.
going to let us talk about parking.
Okay. Okay, so I had mentioned, how people really need to, some people need to drive to campus, our faculty and staff, some students as well. But at the same time, especially on the campus park, there are a lot of pedestrians, bikes, shuttles, private vehicles, and, having them all together really increases the potential for conflicts and for accidents. And so what we're contemplating in the LRDP is really relocating parking to the periphery of the campus park as much as possible. And that will really prioritize the interior of the campus park for pedestrians, bikes, and transit. And, while still providing, easy parking from the edge of the campus park. So you might need to walk a few more minutes into the campus, but it will be a lovely walk on your way to where you're going. And I do think it is very important, to consider the impacts of removing parking. And, we definitely plan for relocating parking as much as possible before we actually remove it from anywhere on campus.
Okay, third time was the charm. Thanks,
Okay.
Marissa. This is another question for either of you, which I think is one that we get asked a lot, is that we have this plan with a lot of land use for the next 15, 20 years in there. That's obviously going to come with a cost. Are these projects in the LRDP funded projects or funded development? And especially right now, we're certainly in a tough fiscal situation because of COVID. Could you talk about how is the LRDP? Is it funded, unfunded? And does that influence projects coming forward?
We do not know what the financial fortunes of the university will be over the next 20 years, not with incredible certainty. So, this plan allows for development on campus without entirely knowing where that funding may come from. I mean, we assume that it will be coming from philanthropy and from state funding. Historically, those have been our sources. But for all of the projects that are identified in this LRDP, no, we do not have funding identified for them. But the LRDP allows us to expedite the environmental review and the entitlement of projects when funding becomes available. So we address these individually as funding becomes available.
So related to COVID-19, has that impacted the planning for the updated LRDP in any way? And specifically in regards to planning for the campus after COVID, does the plan talk about, are we seeing if that would change our planning in any way? What does the LRDP say about the life after COVID-19?
So many discussions about this over the last year. And what we've come to is that we don't entirely know what the post-COVID world is going to look like. We have some assumptions, and there are many groups that are talking about the future of work and remote work. What we still don't know with certainty where we're going to land over the next 20 years. And there are just so many variables that are out there. So ultimately, our assumption has been that we will be, the most conservative way to approach this is to use our 2018 to 19 baseline and to plan as we were pre-COVID, which gives us an envelope within which we can develop. And as that pushes and pulls with different post-COVID assumptions and developments, we have the opportunity to work within that envelope. Artificially restricting it because we felt that there would be less people on campus because of remote work just seemed to be a decision, seemed to rely on decisions that weren't completely that were completely baked at this time. We don't know what's going to happen in the next 2 years, let alone the next 20 years with that. Do you have anything to add, Marissa?
No, I think that's all, I think that's all exactly spot on. I would say, and just kind of emphasize, yes, I think that a lot of the discussions about COVID-19 and kind of post-pandemic conditions are, based on the assumption that there would be fewer people on campus. And we just don't know if that's true. We've heard a lot from our faculty and students in particular that they desperately want to be back on campus. They really miss the in-person experience. And so, it is really important in this case, since we're looking at the kind of maximum envelope for the campus, to be conservative in our estimates.
Great. Well, let me ask you a follow-up on this, Marissa, about return to campus. The plan is talking about something called a coordinated and adaptable mobility network. It's a very technical sounding name, but it's going to hopefully make the campus much better, especially once we're all back there to enjoy this. Can you tell us what that coordinated and adaptable mobility network means? And specifically like what that would mean for faculty, staff, and students?
Yeah, sure. I think this is a good example of where we planners thought that we were being clear and using simple terms. And we thought we were, but it sounds like we weren't quite as clear as we wanted to be. So I'm happy to explain. By coordinated, we really just mean that we're considering all the different modes of transportation together. So, thinking about pedestrian circulation while also thinking about where we could put bike lanes on campus so that we know that there's enough space for all the different things that we want to go together, and that also things are separated when we think that there might be conflict. So, like an example of this is that we wouldn't put a parking lot in a place where there's no road to get there, right? Or where the road is going to pass through a place where there are a lot of pedestrians, because that would create conflict. So we want to make sure that everything is kind of coordinated and to bundle things together where it makes sense, but also to separate them when we need to. And in that way, the systems really reinforce each other rather than kind of fighting each other. And then with respect to adaptable, that really just means that we're trying to think about the future. And this comes back to Wendy's comment about the crystal ball. We don't know what's going to happen in the future with mobility either, right? We hear a lot of talk about electric vehicles. We hear a lot about, will we need cars in the future? And I think on that second question, there might be a point at which we don't need cars, but we don't know when that will be, and we don't know what that will look like. So, we want the system to be adaptable based on future changes, even if we don't know what they are. I think, one example where we do know what might happen, where we do want to be adaptable, is that we know that by 2035, nobody's going to be buying any vehicles that are not zero emission. That's a state law. And so when we plan for parking facilities, they might have electric vehicle charging stations in them. Or they might at least have the infrastructure to accommodate the charging stations. And in that way, even though we're building now, by 2035, we'll have the future adaptability we need to accommodate that change in a way that is not as invasive or expensive as it would be otherwise.
Great. Let me also ask you about something the LRDP says that it does is acknowledge the increasing effects of climate change. I think you just kind of touched on that a little bit with regards to parking. In what other ways does the plan acknowledge the increasing effects of climate change?
Mm-hmm. I think that the document is really committed to sustainability and resilience, and that's really a result of the very alarming and very fast advancing impacts of climate change that we're seeing. Things like the public safety power shutoffs, things like extended droughts. And these are things that we really can address in the physical environment. So we have some plans and goals and policies that are already set out by the Carbon Neutrality Initiative for the whole UC system, for example, by the UC Sustainable Practices Policy, by our own sustainability plan for the campus. And those really speak to infrastructure, but there are other methods also to improve resilience. It might be through energy sources, both renewable energy sources, and finding places to accommodate battery storage. It could be, ways to make our landscapes and open spaces more drought resistant, and to also accommodate more stormwater management features. As I had just mentioned, sustainability is related to transportation. And I think that reflects, our overall commitment to alternative modes of transportation. We actually have already a fairly robust transportation demand management program that has been very successful over the past several years. And then also, thinking about transportation from the perspective of building housing close to campus, so that people can use alternative modes of transportation to get to campus, and it reduces the private vehicles that are coming to the campus. And then, we just add in terms of buildings, we're not going to build everything new. We're going to renovate some of our buildings and kind of renew existing resources, which reduces our embodied carbon. We are required to follow stringent sustainability requirements. And I think that, relative to where we do redevelop sites, that's really in order to make highest and best use of the land. And that's an important sustainability consideration as well.
So from the climate crisis, let me flip over to another one, our housing crisis. And I think you touched on this really well in the presentation. I think it is worth addressing again because we get asked about this so much. How does the LRDP address the housing crisis? We know that we've got an extremely large percentage of our students, about 40%, that cannot live close to campus. We know that that is also a challenge for our faculty and is especially challenging recruitment of new faculty as well as graduate students and postdocs. How is the LRDP looking at our housing crisis?
Wow, we take housing, we take the housing crisis so seriously, and I will add that I'm looking to move in the next 4 months, so this is very real for me as well. I completely get the pressure of the Bay Area housing market. The LRDP does what it can do by establishing a very robust goal for development of housing over the next 20 years. From there, we really have to look at where the funding and financing sources are for any of these projects that are identified within the LRDP. So we can identify them, we can be aggressive about identifying them. Actually executing them comes down to funding and financing. It also comes down to sequencing and understanding effects of projects on each other, on the number of beds that we have available at any given time. For instance, if it's a redevelopment site, we need to make sure that we're keeping bed capacity up as much as possible before we take any beds off for redevelopment. And so I anticipate at the Chancellor's direction that we will be very aggressive in housing development over the next 2 decades. And we have reflected those numbers in what we are able to entitle or get permits for. That's what entitlement means. We've included a very aggressive goal within the current LRDP.
And I would just add, this is the most significant housing goal that the campus has ever had in any of its LRDPs dating back to 1956. And I think that is a testament to the commitment to really improve the housing situation for our community.
Yeah.
Great. So Marissa, let me ask you about one other point that's come up in the LRDP document. It says that the university is going to prioritize diversity and inclusion in campus planning and investment decisions. What does that mean?
Mm-hmm. So I think, diversity and inclusion are topics that really can be covered in a lot of different arenas. And we're excited that it can be really reflected in the physical environment. I think that the LRDP touches on diversity and inclusion primarily in the public realm, which is another planning term, but it means basically all of the space that's available to people outside of buildings. And our goal is to make those spaces as welcoming and inviting as possible. And, we do that through a number of different strategies, whether it's, where we locate different land uses, particularly the ones that support community and gathering. We do that through improving open spaces so that there's a place to sit and gather, so that people can build community. And I think also, down to the level of how do you get around campus? Is there a sign that tells you where you're going? If you don't know where you're going and there are no pathway signs, then I wouldn't call that the most welcoming campus in the world. And so, we want to improve all of these different things about the campus environment. And, there's also a programmatic element to this. We're not just planning for academic and research space. I think there's a real commitment to campus life space, which is all of those kind of social gathering, community building spaces. And in our initial listening sessions, we really heard a lot about the need for social space and how and also for study space and how study space was taking over social space. That was something we consistently heard about from students. This LRDP really responds to that need in the development program, but also in the land use guidelines and thinking about, campus life space as a priority use in almost every campus zone, and particularly the ones where we have the most people.
If I could add, I think it also drills down to the styles, the architectural styles that we think about for our new buildings. And, there's a document that accompanies the LRDP, which is called the Physical Design Framework, which gets into our stylistic considerations a little bit more. And, we're actively working on that right now in terms of how do you reflect reflect a panoply of styles and values within this existing campus and architecture? How does our existing architecture style, which is largely classical on the central core, how does that promote or not promote inclusivity? And how do we want to think about adding to that in the future in informed ways?
Great. I really appreciate that answer. I think diversity and inclusion is just such an important topic that it's great to see it getting reflected in campus planning, especially in the long term. And one group that we brought up quickly, but I wanted to see if you might be able to highlight a little bit about who they are and what they've been doing to help us. We've had a lot of public engagement with a wide variety of perspectives and groups and workshops, but there's one particular group that was specific to the LRDP, and that's the Community Advisory Group. We also call it the CAG. Could you explain what a Community Advisory Group is and who they've included and how they've helped inform the plan?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so we've been meeting quarterly with our Community Advisory Group throughout the whole process. And that is a group of people that comprises representatives from the districts that are neighboring the campus, as well as local business associations, representatives from those groups, as well as from educational institutions and a few other groups. And they're really kind of our pulse on the issues that and concerns and opportunities that our neighbors and the residents of Berkeley see for the campus. And so we've gone to them regularly throughout the process, bringing them, the development program, the population projections for review and to get their feedback. We've talked about the physical design framework. We've talked about a lot of different topics, focusing a little bit on housing and transportation, and that feedback to understand what things are kind of a mystery about the campus, what things seem alarming, what things seem really good. Those are all really important for us to know as we've gone through this process, and that has been really helpful to us as we've crafted the plan to know what things we should be keeping an eye out for so that we can really be a responsible partner to those in the city, whether they're residents or elected officials or staff.
Great. So that kind of wraps up our planned Q&A portion. We're ending a few minutes early, but before we end, I did want to just take a minute to thank Marissa and Wendy for taking the time out of their schedules to do this presentation, this Q&A with us. I also want to thank everyone that took the time out of their schedules to watch us today. I know this is over the lunch hour. We hope that enabled as many people as possible to be able to take a break from the day and watch. But I do want to let everyone know that this has been recorded and will be posted on the LRDP website after today. So if someone was not able to watch, please let them know that they can go to lrdp.berkeley.edu to see the recording of the session, to be able to download and read the draft LRDP document itself. And just in generally to get more information about the LRDP, the associated environmental review, and to get additional updates as we move forward towards the draft plan getting presented to the regents this summer. So with that, again, thank you very much everyone for joining us today. And we'll look forward to seeing you and having you join us for our next online presentation soon. Thank you.
Thank you.